in everything I do. So I also wanted to start by acknowledging some of the achievements of our new president over the last month. No, seriously, like it's only been a month and he's already gotten MAGA supporters all across this country buying electric vehicles to save the planet. Joe Biden could not have done that. We have to admit that. And look, I mean, he has. Sorry, Mike. Thank you. How's that?
Yep.
Achievement number 2, standing up to our worst enemies around the world. I mean, if he hadn't done that, we would be speaking Canadian right now. Right? Credit where credit is due. And finally, keeping his promise to focus like a laser on the economy. And people are saying it's the biggest, most powerful laser ever invented. And just a few days ago, as an example of this, he tweeted out, "Make Greenland rich again." Right? I mean, that's an economic plan, I guess. I try to maintain a sense of humor because I come from a family that survived far worse than anything we've ever experienced with a sense of humor. But obviously we're here because not everything is funny right now. We lost an election. My side lost an election. And whenever that happens, I think it's essential to be respectful to the other side, to hear why people voted in a way that you didn't agree with. And the message that I got from people I know who support President Trump, from people I've listened to all across the country, is that they voted because of the economy, they voted because prices were too high, they voted because they wanted to do something to stabilize the border. And I have to respect all of those messages. Those were absolutely legitimate things for people to be concerned about. But I also think it is fair to say that there weren't a lot of people in this country in November who voted for a crazy trade war that is going to make literally everything from cars to houses to electricity more expensive for working Americans. I didn't hear a lot of talk about that on the campaign trail. I don't think there were a lot of people who voted to take an economy that, for whatever its problems, was creating jobs and bringing manufacturing back to our country, to take that and to turn it into an economy where some of the leading economists in this country right now are saying we have a 50% chance of a recession. Nor did I think anyone ask for a Secretary of the Treasury who goes on TV to say a recession, it would be worth it. Or a president who then tweets out, people should shut up about the price of eggs, which he did. And I certainly don't think, although there's a lot of concern out there about the size of government and shaking things up, I don't think a lot of people voted to take a weirdo James Bond villain billionaire who 2 weeks ago said, get this, the main weakness of Western civilization is empathy, and to give that guy our personal private information and the keys to Social Security and Medicare. I don't think there's a lot of demand in this country for that. And even for folks who want to reduce the size of government, I don't think they want to see that billionaire high as a kite dancing on a stage with a chainsaw mocking the people who are being fired all over this country. I don't think that's what anybody wants. But I think that's why we're here today, and why an event that we thought was going to be a little bit smaller has taken off like this. Because I think we sense that there is something happening in America. There is a crisis in America right now. There is a contest in America that is without precedent in our history. It's not an argument about what government should do for people and
how much government should spend. That's the argument we always have in our elections. It's an argument about whether government should exist at all, or whether we should sell it piece by piece for scrap and use the savings not to pay down the debt, which is what more responsible Republicans at least talk about, but to use that savings to pay for a tax cut for billionaires and for millionaires, which, if they have their way, will still increase the deficit and the debt by $3 trillion over the next 10 years. And, you know, we see the Ukraine signs here. Thank you for that. Please have that. It's not an argument about how America should lead the free world, which is an argument we've had passionately amongst each other between the parties for decades. It's an argument about whether we should go over to the other side. Because that's what seems to be happening when Putin's spokesperson a couple of weeks ago says with a big smile on his face that we are now perfectly aligned with the American administration, which is something that just fills me with dread and with shame, because that is not who we are as a country. No. And I know, look, thank you. And I talk to a lot of Republicans about this, particularly the ones I worked with on the Hill and folks that I worked with on national security issues over the years. And a lot of them, you've heard this probably 1,000 times, like in the quiet, private conversations, like they're horrified by some of what they're seeing. And their obsessive focus right now, the ones who have any access to this administration, their obsessive focus every single day is to manage the moods of the madmen. Because that's the only way they think they can make things a little bit better, to get him to switch. Like this week, he got we had an agreement with Ukraine that was a little bit better. We'll talk about that, I'm sure. But they're sitting there trying desperately to manage the moods of this mad king, because rule number one with the leader who we have is you cannot contradict him. You're not allowed to contradict him to his face. And the president of Ukraine learned that, right? We saw that debacle in the Oval Office, because he committed the so-called crime after an hour of listening to all kinds of nonsense of contradicting the president and the vice president of the United States. And the punishment for that was 2 weeks of no support from the United States and more Ukrainians dying and Russians advancing on the battlefield. But everybody is in the same boat. Republicans aren't allowed to contradict him to his face. They're not allowed to tell him that these tariffs are going to tank the economy. But we are not bound by that rule. We do not have to grovel. We do not have to say, sir, thank you, sir, you're such a great man, sir, and of course 2 + 2 is 5, sir, and we're so sorry that you had to live with a 2 + 2 is 4 hoax for so many years. We can stand up and tell the truth. We can stand up for our country and for our Constitution, and that's what we're going to do. And remember, like his strategy, their strategy, it's so obvious, it's so simple, it's just throw all this crap at us again and again, day after day, hoping that we become demoralized and paralyzed, that we just give up because it's just too much. It's psychological warfare. And it's very obvious if you think about what they're doing. But if you just take a moment to think about it clearly and logically, you know the law's not on his side. Most of the American people, including a lot of people who voted for him for those legitimate reasons, are not with him with the crazy stuff that he's doing right now. The polls show 55 to 65% opposition to almost every single one of the things that I mentioned earlier on.
That's not enough.
Right.
It's not enough, but it's a lot. And that means, like, he's not as strong as he pretends to be. You notice with these tariffs, like, he puts them on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday he's caving.
Yeah.
And then Thursday he tries again, and on Friday he's caving. It's like, midnight on daylight savings time. Like, are the tariffs, are we jumping forward with the tariffs or backward with the tariffs? But what it reveals is a fundamental weakness. And those of us who think this is wrong, we need to feel confidence and strength as we challenge this, as we must. Not helplessness, but confidence and strength. If I'm a nonprofit or a city or state government that has been unlawfully deprived of funding, I'm going to court right away. And I'm going to win most of those cases. And just today we had another big victory. A federal judge said they have to rehire every single so-called provisional employee that they have. And if I'm in Congress, I'm using every ounce of power that I have to try to stop this, to try to put the brakes on as much of this as possible, knowing that Congress, that the Democrats can't stop everything. You have to acknowledge that. But they do have some power. And this week, you know what's happening on Capitol Hill. Every single Democrat but one in the House voted no on this so-called continuing resolution, as they should have. And I'm sure we'll talk about this because the Senate's got a tough choice. And I think any of you who've been following what I've been writing, you know where I stand on this. You do not transfer the power of the purse from the Congress of the United States to Elon Musk. And if I'm a citizen of this country, if I'm a voter, I also know what to do. Because we're going to ultimately fix this at the ballot box. And don't let anybody tell you there's not going to be another election. That's just psychological warfare too. We are going to have our voice. We are going to have a chance. And this congressional district is important, and we're going to get to that in 2026. But please, this is another mistake Democrats sometimes make. Do not forget what comes first. If you are a New Jersey voter, you have a chance this year to make the first statement alongside Virginia. Our two states get to vote this year. It'll be the first statement of where the American people stand on this. Do not forget that. Get to know your candidates for governor. And for state legislature, choose the ones in the primary. If you're a Democrat, choose the ones in June who you think are best equipped to deal with the threat that we face. And then in November, this cannot be a low turnout off-year election in the state of New Jersey.
No.
And with all these elections, remember what we know how to do. People sometimes walk up to me and they say, Tom, we did all this stuff in 2018. We knocked on doors for you. We did it again in 2020. It was so great, but it didn't work because look at what's happening now. We've got this horrible problem back again. Of course it worked. We won in 2018. We stopped this in 2018. We elected a president in 2020 who successfully pursued one of the most profoundly impactful and positive agendas that I think we've seen in my lifetime. So what you did worked. And then they did some stuff that worked in 2024, and we got our butts kicked, right? But, 24. I confused I had too many of these, and some of them were a nightmare. Most of them were not. And so, we got to do that again. That's all. It's not rocket science. In 2018, when I was running for the first time, the last weekend of canvassing before the election, I'm sure some of you were there, in Summit, New Jersey, we had a canvassing launch location that got 1,000 people on Saturday and another 1,000 people on Sunday. And the Summit police The Summit police were called by the neighbor of the house that we were using because the neighbor was Bob Hugan and he thought we were there to demonstrate against him. Nobody knew he was there. We were there to canvass. And the police came, saw what was happening, thank you, ma'am, and helped us direct the traffic and keep everybody safe. And we did not have 2,000 people in Summit the final weekend in 2020 or 2022. And we have to have that in 26. We have to have that in 25. We have to have that every year. I don't like the fact that we have to do this for the rest of our lives, but we do, and that's okay. Because that is what it means to be a citizen of a democracy that's fragile. Yeah, I saw that. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that. So let me leave it at that. This is not a good situation. There's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of hurt. I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. But the people in this room have power. Our representatives have power. The absent one has power that he may not use, but he's going to hear from you. The ones who agree with you are also going to hear from you, including Mr. Schumer, because we need to hold our Democrats accountable too. If we approach this with the right attitude, we are going to win. We are going to keep our country and look back on this as a step backwards in a period of American history where we mostly step forwards. Thank you very much. Now let's take some